Vishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shiguro Shriyotopada Kamalam Shigurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagra Jatam Sagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta राधा कांता नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्ता वृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। नमा ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी नीति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशे तारिणे। All right. Welcome everyone to the morning Srimad Bhagavatam discussion. Today I will be reading from the third canto, chapter 21, verse number 33. I'll read the verse, the translation, and then purport, and then we will briefly discuss. Maitreya uvacha evam tam anubhasyath bhagavan pratyak akshajaha jagama bindu sarasaha sarasvatya parishritat. Once again, Maitreya uvacha evam tam anubhashyatah bhagwan pratyak akshajaha jagama bindu saha sarasvatya parishritat. Synonyms are the word-to-word meanings. Maitreya uvacha, the great sage Maitreya said, evam, thus, tam, to him, anubhashya, having spoken, atha, then, Bhagwan, the Lord, pratyak, directly, aksha, by senses, jaha, who is perceived, jagama, went away, bindu sara saha, from lake Bindu Sarovar, Sarasvatya, by the river Saraswati, parishritat, encircled. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Maitreya went on, thus having spoken to Kardama Muni, the Lord, who reveals himself only when the senses are in Krishna consciousness, departed from that lake called Bindu Sarovar, which was encircled by the river Saraswati. Purport. One word in this verse is very significant. The Lord is stated here to be Pratyag Akshajaha. He is imperceptible to material senses, but still he can be seen. This appears to be contradictory. We have material senses, but how can we see the Supreme Lord? He is called Adhokshaja, which means that he cannot be seen by the material senses. Akshaja means knowledge perceived by material senses. Because the Lord is not an object that can be understood by speculation with our material senses, he is also called Ajita. He will conquer, but no one can conquer him. What does it mean, then, that still he can be seen? It is explained that no one can hear the transcendental name of Krishna. No one can understand his transcendental form, and no one can assimilate his transcendental pastimes. It is not possible. Then how is it possible that he can be seen and understood? When one is trained in devotional service and renders service unto him, gradually one's senses are purified of material contamination. When one's senses are thus purified, then one can see, one can understand, one can hear, and so on. The purification of the material senses and perception of transcendental form, name, and quality of Krishna are combined together in one word, Pratyak Akshaja, which is used here. Okay. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Tadati Swapadantikam. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada placed within this material world? The mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya give me shelter under his lotus feet. Okay, so we will briefly discuss the verse and the purport. Before we start discussing, I'll like to read a few of the verses before this verse so that we get the context of, we understand the context, but it will, for this particular session, it will help us understand the context. We are reading text number 33. So I will read from 20 to 32, just the translations. Text 20 of 3.3rd Canto, chapter 21. 20. My dear Lord, although it is not your desire, you manifest this creation of gross and subtle elements just for our sensual satisfaction. Let your causeless mercy be upon us, have appeared before us in your eternal form, adorned with a splendid wreath of tulsi leaves. 21. I continuously offer my respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet, of which it is worthy to take shelter, because you shower all benedictions on the insignificant, to give all living entities detachment from fruitive activity by realizing you. You have expanded these material worlds by your own energy. 22. Maitreya resumed. Sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. 23. The Supreme Lord said, having come to know what was in your mind, I have already arranged for that, for which you have worshipped me well through your mental and sensory discipline. 24. The Lord continued, my dear Rishi, O leader of the living entities, for those who serve me in devotion by worshipping me, especially persons like you, who have given up everything unto me, there is never any question of frustration. 25. The Emperor Swayambhuva Manu, the son of Lord Brahma, who is well known for his righteous acts, has his seat in Brahma Varta and rules over the earth with its 7 oceans. 26. The day after tomorrow, O Brahmana, that celebrated emperor who is expert in religious activities will come here with his queen Shatarupa, wishing to see you. 27. He has a grown-up daughter whose eyes are black. She is ready for marriage, and she has good character and all good qualities. She is also searching for a good husband. My dear sir, her parents will come to see you, who are exactly suitable for her, just to deliver the daughter as your wife. 28. The princess O holy sage, will be just the type you have been thinking of in your heart for all these long years. She will soon be yours and will serve you to your heart's content. 29. She will bring forth 9 daughters from the seed sown in her by you, and through the daughters you beget, the sages will duly beget children. 30. With your heart cleansed by properly carrying out my command, resigning to me the fruits of all your acts, you will finally attain to me. 31. Showing compassion to all living entities, you will attain self-realization, giving assurance of safety to all. You will perceive your own self as well as all the universes in me and myself in you. 32. O great sage, I shall manifest my own plenary portion through your wife Devahuti, along with your 9 daughters, and I shall instruct her in the system of philosophy that deals with the ultimate principles of categories. And then today's verse. Maitreya went on, thus having spoken to Kardama Muni, the Lord, who reveals himself only when the senses are in Krishna consciousness, departed from the lake called Bindu Sarovar, which was encircled by the river Saraswati. So as we read through these verses leading up to today's verse, which is text 33, we see that this is the beginning of the creation, and there have been a few discussions here that at that time there were, just like we are here in on the planet Earth, and when someone becomes the marriageable age, then they start selecting for a suitable person to marry. And how many choices are there? There's a lot. But here we see that during the beginning, there was not much choice. But the living entities that came into the creation at that time, obviously, they are coming from their previous birth and with their mindset, the mind that they had. And the creation is such designed that here we see that the Lord told Kardama Muni that Devahuti, who will be coming with, is exactly what he has been desiring in his heart. So even though in the small set of creation in the beginning, the creation is in such way that the living entities that are come and who have been given the responsibility to go to propagate, like to create the population, the Prajapatis and everyone, they have matching propensities, meaning like they are who they want. For example, Kardama Muni wanted someone, and that same person is existing at that time to marry. Devahuti wanted someone to marry, and that person who she liked existed at that time within that small set of creation. So that was something that came to my mind. Now coming to today's verse, Prabhupada is talking about Adokshaja, Ajita, Pratyag Akshaja. So having looked at this, what comes to the mind is in chapter 13 also Krishna says, text, I'll read from the translation from chapter 13, text 14. Everywhere are his hands and legs, his eyes, heads, and faces. He has ears everywhere. In this way, the Supersoul exists, pervading everything. Text 15. The Supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time, he is the master of all the modes of material nature. I'll read one more, the sixth text, 16, actually two more, 16 and 17. 16, the supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, the moving and the non-moving. Because he is subtle, he is beyond the power of material senses to see or to know. Although far, far away, he is also near to all. And text 17. Although the supersoul appears to be divided among all beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of all living entities, maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all. So very similar to what is being described by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 13. Here also, this same contradiction comes up, that the Lord can never be seen. And Prabhupada talks here specifically in the purport that because the Lord is not an object that can be understood by speculation with our material senses, he is also called Ajita. He will conquer, but no one can conquer him. And then he goes on to say that, I'm looking for that particular sentence. Yeah. It is explained that no one can hear the transcendental name of Krishna. No one can understand his transcendental form, and no one can assimilate his transcendental pastimes. It is not possible. So what Srila Prabhupada is saying is that Krishna being the supreme and we being the supreme most, the complete opposite, the supreme most tiniest part and parcel of that supreme, we don't have the capacity or capability to understand, even hear the transcendental name of Krishna. We cannot understand his form. We cannot assimilate or understand or even fathom his pastimes. It's just not possible. But then how is it possible that he can be seen and understood, as mentioned in this verse? The same thing in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says in the 18th chapter, I'm looking up that verse, Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati, 18.55. So I'll quickly read that verse. (18.55) Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati, Yavan Yaschashmi Tatvata, Tato Mam Tatvato Gyatva Vishate Tad Anantaram. So Krishna says here, one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So although the verses in chapter 13, they said that, and here in this verse that we are discussing today, Bhagavatam 3.21.33, the personality of Godhead cannot be seen through the eyes, he cannot be understood, his pastimes cannot be understood, nothing. But then he did come before Kardama Muni, and he also told him. So Maitreya is saying that, thus having spoken to Kardama Muni, the Lord who reveals himself only when the senses are in Krishna consciousness. So this is exactly what Krishna is also saying in the 18th chapter, 55, verse number 55. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. Bhaktya Mam Abhijanati. So only the Bhakta can know me. So that, to understand that, we have to understand that the senses that we have, the material sense, can only see material objects. The objects that we see, the material senses can see material objects, but there are spiritual objects, spiritual things, spiritual form. And Lord, having the spiritual form, being completely spiritual, cannot be seen or understood through the material senses. But then when we are in devotional service, we can understand. So how do we understand that? That means that we have spiritual senses. We have the spiritual body. The soul is there. On top of the soul, there is the subtle covering of mind, intelligence, and false ego. And on top of that, we have the another covering of the gross material, earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Now, because the soul has also this, and that's also described in the Bhagavatam. The soul has spiritual senses, but they are covered by subtle senses or the mind intelligence, which are then further covered by the gross senses. But because we have the spiritual senses, it makes sense to have the material senses. As an example for today, like I like to give a particular example. Today's modern cars, they all have sensory objects. They have senses in the sense that when we drive, we can see the cars can see the road. The cars can, if the car is trying to navigate to a different lane, it will start vibrating and bring the car back to the lane in which I'm driving. So that means the car has senses. Now the car has senses. Car having senses makes sense only if I, the driver, have senses. Otherwise, what's the use of those senses? So when I have those senses and the car has senses, the car can assist me in my driving. So similarly, the body, the soul has spiritual senses. And because the spiritual senses are there, it makes sense for the body to have senses to navigate. Now, in the situation of the car, if I am sleeping, the car will drive. And maybe like, okay, according to my destination, it will go. But if there is something in between, some emergency comes up, it will try to act according to what is programmed in the senses, in the sensory machine. But if I am awake, I can take appropriate actions. So similarly, in our case, when the soul is sleeping or is it said it's in the sleeping in the lap of Maya, the senses will drive however they are programmed and they are taking us. But if we are awake, then we can take actions and we can see through those senses, and to the degree that we are awake, we are able to understand what is happening. And that's how the senses become spiritualized. And by spiritualized senses, we can see. And the spiritualization of senses can happen only through devotional service. Devotional service is that's a completely different topic, but devotional service aligns us to the Supreme Lord, to our spiritual identity, to our original constitutional position. And to the degree that we are awake, we are able to use those senses in the service of Krishna. And that's how they are facilitated to see spiritual things, spiritual activities, ultimately the spiritual form of Lord and the Lord himself. So I'll stop here. It's almost 7:59, and I'll see if there is anything to discuss or talk. If not, we will stop here. So thank you everyone for joining.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you. I just wanted to say nice analogy with the car. makes it somewhat practical to understand.
Yeah, thank you. And the reason I was actually not prepared today to speak, and that's why I've also not turned on the camera, but because we are going through the Bhakti Shastri and we just did chapter 13, so it was kind of fresh in my mind.
Mm.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. Have a good rest of your day.